Hey guys, welcome back, it's Ripe again. In today's video, my ridiculously entitled neighbor Karen demands I hand over my muscle car to her son as soon as he turns 17. When I refuse to do so, she rages and ends up stealing my car. Here is how I dealt with this entitled Karen. Let's dive right into the story. So the title story starts like this. I live next to the worst woman in the entire neighborhood and her unfortunate excuse of an offspring. I'm gonna call her Karen for the duration of this story because that's the ideal name I can use to describe this woman. She wears tacky looking clothing, too much makeup, too much jewelry that I would not be surprised if it's fake, a fake tan to go with it, and enough hairspray to choke somebody. As you can imagine, that comes with an attitude and entitlement to match, and she has no issues being blunt with it. She is a horrible neighbor that is constantly asking for favors, but will never thank you or ever agree to do one for you in return. A very small example was the time she wanted me to go grocery shopping for her because she was supposedly terribly busy. And at first I agreed, but then I found out she expected me to pay for it. Now, her kid being raised by her did not do him many favors, and as I watched him get older, I saw him go from brat to a full-on menace. He is in high school and his mother lets him do anything he wants and yells at neighbors that try and complain. He likes to hang out with his friends, drinking and blasting music in the middle of the night, and she is perfectly okay with it as long as her little boy is happy. I know that he is a product of having her as a mother, but at his age I'm considering him just as bad. But anyway, my pride and joy is a muscle car, my Pontiac Firebird Trans Am. I don't really drive it very often, but I do take it out sometimes for local shows and things like that. Nothing really fancy, just a bunch of guys proud of their old muscle cars and wanting to enjoy sharing and looking. Now, Karen's son has been obsessed with my car for many years. I wouldn't have an issue with it if he was a good kid, but I don't really want to associate with that family. Anyway, I can see him looking at it and sometimes asking me questions and wanting to get in my garage. I always tell him no, and then he runs to complain to his mom about me being mean and not letting him see the car. So this has been a running thing for a couple of years, but it came to a head when Karen came to my door one day. Me? Karen, to what do I owe the pleasure? I am sarcastic with Karen, but she never seems to get it. So I relish to getting to speak to her in a way that I know is insulting, but she thinks is a compliment. Karen, I came by to tell you that my son passed his driving test this morning. And he did such a good job that you can finally hand that old junker off to him. I think it would be perfect instead of him driving my new SUV. What are you talking about? Because I know you don't mean my muscle car, right? Karen, that old thing in your garage. I told him if he passed that, he could have that as his starter car. Me? It's not your car to give away, Karen. This is a classic muscle car and your son passed after failing twice, once for showing up drunk at the test. If you think I would even let him touch my car, you are clearly insane. Karen, you're just jealous that I was able to raise a son all by myself without any help from a man. Open the garage and give me the keys because he wants to go show his friends his new car now. I tell her where to shove it and slam the door in her face. Nothing has caused me more anger than Karen demanding I give her kid my car. Not being told to buy her groceries, not being told to stop a home repair because she didn't like the noise, not even her brat keeping me up with his partying. I had to cool off, so I called some of my buddies to see if they wanted to go to a bar or something. Being next door to Karen in that moment was the worst thing for me. A few hours later, I was at the bar having fun and not thinking about those two or what was going on while I was out. I came home absolutely hammered to the point that I woke up with one shoe on and only half my body on the bed. I did not have to work the next day and got driven home safely, so I was planning on sobering up the rest of the day and watching Netflix. When I was outside though, putting my trash cans back in, I noticed that my garage door was slightly open. Unlocked and cracked, which I know for a fact I didn't do. Opening it, I noticed that my car was gone and I had no doubt in my mind who managed to do this. My car usually sits on basically a flat surface that has a chain, so I can hook the car up to my truck if I want to take it to a show. It's just an easy default way to have it, and the fact that everything was missing, it was clear somebody had broken into my garage, hooked it up to something and pulled it right out of there. I walked over, and of course in her driveway was my muscle car sitting there already looking like crap. The kid clearly drove it as the wheels and siding were coated in mud. I did not want to confront her myself, so I called the police. When they arrived, she was telling them how it was her father's car, and when her son got his license, he finally inherited it. That I was so jealous, I wanted to take away the one thing the child had of his grandpa. I'll admit this was a good act, and I don't really blame the police for not knowing who to believe. Honestly, Karens can sometimes be great actresses and cry on cue. Her kid backing her up and acting young and innocent also helped their cause. The thing is that I had something in my back pocket. It was video footage of the inside of my garage and it being broken into and the car being moved. Karen started to say that I had stolen it first, but before she could, I produced more videos. Videos of me with the car at expos for years, as well as knowledge of what was under the hood that Karen and her son did not know anything about. Suddenly, Karen knew that she had been caught and, like all Karens, attempted to change her story of how the car was a gift from me. She was arrested for stealing my car, and honestly, her son might have been arrested too if not for his mom saying that he knew nothing about it. The thing with that car is, since I don't drive it, I don't actually have it registered or insured. It's not legal to drive, so the fact that he was driving it could have gotten him in a world of trouble. Some mud was not enough, and both claimed the car never left the driveway, so only the mom got in trouble. Still, if that boy at age 17 doesn't change things soon, I can guarantee that he's gonna end up in just as much trouble as his mother. And yeah, ripe stars, I forgot how the saying goes, but basically, kids come after their parents, and in this case, the mother is obviously a terrible role model. I hope the kid later on gets some better influence in his life and maybe can turn his faith around. If you enjoyed the story, please don't forget to like the video and post some star emojis in the comments if you want to support me. And the next one is titled Malicious Compliance. My friend, I will call her Sandy, worked at a travel agency in British Columbia, Canada. It was a small owner-operated business with the owner and 3 employees, including my friend. Everyone worked Monday to Friday from 9 AM to 5 PM. One of my friend's co-workers, I will call her Jane, an older woman in her early to mid-60s, was a long-time nuisance employee. Among other sketchy behavior, Jane was always scamming ways to take time off over and above her official paid vacation time. In order to make up for the lost hours, she would claim overtime hours and pay by supposedly going into the office in her off hours to finish up work without being requested by the owner to do so. Despite being caught in her own lies on a number of occasions and being warned about trying to claim for unsanctioned overtime, the owner of the travel agency was reluctant to officially reprimand Jane or get rid of her. The reason being is the owner discovered after she had hired Jane that Jane actually had been fired from her previous job at another local travel agency for pulling the same stunt. However, Jane had sued her former employer for unfair dismissal and had won a settlement. After a few years of my friend Sandy working at the travel agency, the owner was ready to retire and offered to sell the business to my friend. Sandy took her up on the deal and took over the business while keeping on Jane and the other employee. Once again, just as the previous owner was afraid to get rid of Jane, so was Sandy for fear of being sued. When Sandy took over the business, she instituted guidelines regarding taking time off and she established an official no overtime policy. Jane would still try with her shenanigans, but was far less successful in getting what she wanted with my friend in charge. However, Jane still had one trick up her sleeve when she wanted to take time off on a whim. Sandy was a divorced single mom of 2 boys who were heavily involved in youth hockey. She would sometimes leave the office an hour or 2 before closing to get her boys to hockey practice or a game. In order to avoid requesting in person and potentially being denied, Jane would wait for Sandy to be out of the office to book a day off if she didn't feel like coming into work or had made plans. Sandy would then arrive at work the next morning only to discover that Jane was not coming in. However, despite this happening a number of times, Sandy would usually let it slide since there was now a definite no overtime policy. Therefore, Jane could no longer claim to come into work on the weekend or after hours in order to try and make up for the day off. She would either miss out on a day's pay, in turn saving Sandy money as the owner, or it would come out of her remaining paid vacation days. Moreover, 2 people in the office at one time could usually handle everything. Jane not coming in was really a no-loss situation for Sandy. There was one time, however, when Sandy was gonna be away for 1 or 2 work days just before the weekend to take her boys to a hockey tournament. She told both Jane and the other employee, both verbally and in writing, that they could not book time off for the dates in question since she would be away and needed both of them in the office. Within a few days of giving this notice, Sandy went into the office on a Saturday to do some paperwork and go through the sales for the week. This is when she discovered that only the day before, Jane had booked a trip for her daughter and son-in-law to Las Vegas, as well as a plane ticket in her name to Calgary, where her daughter lived. Both the trip to Vegas and the ticket to Calgary coincided with the date Sandy would be out of the office. Sandy then checked the vacation booking schedule to further discover that Jane had indeed booked the days off that she had expressly been told she couldn't have. Not mentioning she had discovered the travel Jane had booked for herself and her daughter, Sandy emailed Jane telling her she would have to deny her the days off since she had already been told they were unavailable, because she, Sandy, would be away and needed Jane in the office. Through a continued series of email exchanges, Jane replied and outright lied to Sandy, with some excuse about her daughter getting some long-awaited medical treatment or surgery, and she needed to go to Calgary to help out for a few days and look after her granddaughter. Sandy replied to this lie by telling Jane she knew about the trip she had booked to Vegas for her daughter and son-in-law, that Jane's trip to Calgary was most likely to babysit her granddaughter while her daughter was in Vegas, and that she would still have to deny Jane the days off, especially since she booked them after being told they were unavailable. Then Jane countered in her subsequent reply, without even addressing the fact that she had been caught in a lie, that she had been a dedicated employee of the travel agency for several years and could not understand why she was being treated so unfairly after all she had done for the business. She then wrote that since she was not being treated as a valued employee, she had no choice but to retire and was giving her 2 weeks notice. Despite Jane's threat, Sandy replied that she would still be unable to grant her the days off and left it at that without making any mention of Jane's threat to quit and retire. Sandy then contacted her accountant, who also acted as her de facto business advisor, and explained what had happened with Jane. Also aware of Jane's previous shenanigans, Sandy's accountant told her that this was the out she had been looking for with Jane, and she had it all in writing. He told her that Jane had essentially resigned and retired, and all Sandy needed to do was honor Jane's desire to do so, let her finish out her 2 weeks, or pay her 2 weeks' wages in lieu of no further severance pay legally required since she hadn't been fired. The following Monday, Sandy went into the office early, accompanied by her long-term boyfriend, to act as a witness. She put Jane's belongings from her desk into a box and took the things that were property of the business. Since Jane was old school and had resisted inputting client information in the computer database, this also included a small box filled with index cards which had client phone numbers, addresses, credit card information, and other personal info noted on them. In the meantime, the other employee had arrived for work and they all waited for Jane to show up. Jane arrived just before 9, acting as though nothing had happened, and greeted everyone with a good morning as she walked through the door. However, she was apparently taken slightly aback when she noticed Sandy's boyfriend seated in the far corner of the office. At this point, Jane was midway to her desk when Sandy informed her that there was no need to go any further and that she had accepted Jane's notification of retirement. She then handed Jane a check compensating her for the hours she had worked in the current period, as well as 2 weeks' wages in lieu of Jane finishing out her final 2 weeks before her retirement. Honestly, Jane was dumbfounded and went into panic mode. "But I didn't retire! I'm not ready to retire!" Sandy responded that indeed she had retired given her notice and had proof of it in writing. All Jane could do was continue repeating, "But I didn't retire! I'm not ready to retire!" while unsuccessfully attempting to get the support of the other employee who refused to come to her defense. Sandy then pointed to the box containing Jane's belongings, wished her a happy retirement, and told her to leave the office. Jane quickly rifled through the box and noticed that the small box containing the index cards with client info was not there. She insisted that Sandy return it to her, which Sandy refused to do, explaining that it was property of the business, contained personal client info, and that she would be in violation of Canadian privacy laws if she were to let Jane take it. Jane's shock had now turned to obstinance and she refused to leave without the box. Both the other employee and Sandy's boyfriend had started to get involved, repeatedly telling Jane to just leave. Sandy then informed Jane that if she didn't leave, they would have to call the RCMP, which is Canadian police, at which point Sandy's boyfriend dialed 911 to inform the dispatcher of a disgruntled former employee at XYZ travel agency who was refusing to leave the premises. Within a few minutes, 2 police officers arrived and Jane immediately ran to the door, ranting about being fired and about the missing box of client info. In order to de-escalate the situation, one police officer told Jane to come outside and explain to him her side of the story. The other officer remained in the office to hear Sandy's side of the story, agreeing that Jane was not legally entitled to the box of client info. The other officer then re-entered the business and told Jane to wait outside. He said that Jane was insisting that Sandy was holding onto her personal belongings, namely a box of important info. Both Sandy and the officer who had spoken to her explained the contents of the box to the other officer, who in turn agreed it was not Jane's property. The cops then picked up the larger box of Jane's personal belongings, took it outside to Jane and told her that she needed to go home. To rub salt in Jane's wounds, the next day Sandy put up a large sign in the window of the business congratulating Jane on her retirement, and even put a small announcement in the local newspaper doing the same thing. The icing on the piece of revenge cake was Sandy, when filing out the necessary government forms for when an employee quits, gets fired or retires, made sure to check the box labeled retired for the reason for Jane no longer being employed. By doing so, Jane was ineligible to collect unemployment insurance benefits. And wow, ripe stars, I gotta say, I would not want to cross paths with this Sandy woman, or at least do something bad to her, because the way she inflicted revenge on this Jane woman was absolutely insane. This might be one of the most sophisticated and kind of evil revenge stories I've ever read. Absolutely brilliant. Let me know what you think about this story in the comments. And please don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed the story. And the next one is titled, My Goal, Get Him Evicted. I got a new neighbor at the end of October. I was on vacation and my sister was dog/house sitting for me. She texted me to tell me he was extremely loud. I thought maybe it was just her. I got home from vacation about a week later and haven't had a decent night's sleep since then, unless I crash at my boyfriend's. I have lived here over 7 years and have had 6 different upstairs neighbors in that time. I have never made a noise complaint before. He slams his door constantly, stomps around the house, plays fetch with his 70-pound dog in the house at 11:30 at night, has loud phone conversations after midnight right above my bedroom in his bedroom. I have been recording the noise for months now. The landlord has heard some of the recordings. She sent him a notice about a month ago and the noise continued. After he woke me in the middle of the night 3 more times, she sent another notice stating he would start receiving fines if he disturbed quiet hours again, 10 PM to 8 AM. He was pissed when he got the letter and called her to say he can hear me too. Obviously, he can hear me during the day sometimes, but he is claiming he can hear me teaching every day, word for word. Only problem with that is, we are back in the building. He is not hearing me teach. I am gone from 6:30 AM till about 1 PM. She told him that quiet hours are what is important. She emailed me to let me know he doesn't think he is that loud and asked me to record future instances. Guess who woke me up at 4 AM today, slammed the door on the way in, stomped through the house, allowed his dog to run the length of the house several times, stomped back down the stairs to take the dog out, slammed the door again and stomped back up. Guess who got the whole thing on video? I emailed the landlord and told her I would drop off a flash drive with the recording this afternoon. I am over this jerk. Small update, I spoke with the landlord yesterday. She agreed the noise was ridiculous and told me his attitude at the last contact was that it is an apartment and I need to deal with it because he is not loud. She is going to edit the videos a bit. I kind of curse in a few because I'm so frustrated and exhausted, and invite him in to listen to them. Last night at midnight, I was treated to about 3 minutes of loud intercourse and an equally loud conversation. When there was a lull, I yelled at the ceiling, "Go talk in the living room!" Dead silence after that. Maybe he gets it, maybe he thinks I am being a witch, I don't care, I just wanna sleep. And the next one is an update to the previous story. It has been a bit, but I figured I would update. It is long. So here's what happened. The landlord gave me more runaround, told me she cannot stop him from walking around and living in his apartment. I told her all of the recordings of his stomping and throwing things and midnight yell sessions on his phone were proof of it not being regular living. I continued to send her emails and kept recording. I sent her more recordings and kept getting a boring old, "I've let the management company know." as an answer. There were safety issues such as him setting off the smoke alarm 6 times in as many months, leaving his dog locked out on the balcony in the cold while he wasn't home, throwing heavy things off the balcony and destroying the landscape. One day she texted me and asked if I could come in to talk about everything. She pretty much let me know he hates smoke and has complained about me smoking 3 times, but I don't smoke. But anyway, since it is not against the lease to smoke in your own apartment, she was giving me a way to make it uncomfortable for him so he doesn't renew his lease in October. Unfortunately, I am allergic to most smoke, so I really couldn't do much. I had incense, but it is not the same. At one point in the conversation, she brought up moving me to another apartment, but I would have to pay like $500 in app and moving fees, plus the increase in rent. Rent has skyrocketed here. Everything came to a head on Memorial Day. I've been spending most weekends at my boyfriend's place so I can sleep. However, the night before MD I spent at home. He was not there, it was really quiet. I went to bed around 11. At about 2:45 AM, this idiot comes home, slams the door, stomps across his apartment and then spends the next 20 minutes stomping around above my head. Then he goes off to take a shower. Dude takes like 3 showers a day, and then it's back to stomping above me by 3:30 AM. Then he gets on the phone. He doesn't speak at a normal level, he yells everything and has it on speaker with the volume as high as possible so I can hear everything the other person is saying as well. I am so done at this point. I turn on my white noise machine and try to drown him out. But I can't. Every time he laughs, he slams his feet into the floor. His entire apartment is carpeted, but still sounds like a baby elephant up there. I finally just say, "Shut up, shut up, shut up," at the ceiling, didn't even yell, just a little louder than my normal voice. Of course he doesn't shut up. I finally gave up and slept on the couch. The next morning I am in my bedroom cleaning and getting the laundry together. It is a little before 8 AM. At 8, end of quiet hours, I put on show tunes and sing along. At 8:04 he stomps into the bathroom and then back to bed while cursing. And yes, I know the exact time because I've been logging his drama. I am in my bedroom for about an hour. I take a break from cleaning and sit in the living room and grade papers. At about 10:45 I head back to the bedroom, turn my music back on and start cleaning in other parts of the house. He gets up again and finally takes his poor dog out. My sister and preteen nephew are on their way over at this point, so I am fully expecting it when I get a knock on the door. I call out to my nephew and I hear, "No, it is your neighbor." I opened the door a crack because I don't know this guy. He tried to tell me the noise is not him and he heard me say "shut up" and that my TV was on too loud and too early this morning. And then when I said that the noise was clearly coming from his apartment, he tried to say it was the neighbor to my left. That is impossible because there is a firewall there and I have never in my 7+ years of living there heard a peep from them. There's times I've been outside while their dog is barking and once I am inside I cannot hear a thing. I told him it could not happen because of the firewall and he tried to again say it was not him and that he heard it too, how he only got home at like 3 and it couldn't have been him. He heard it too. I was like, that is when the noise started and that I know his voice at this point. And I can clearly tell when his shower is running because we share pipes. So that all the noise I hear along with all of the above must be him. He kept saying, "It wasn't me." "Okay, Shaggy." Finally, I'm like, okay, and close the door. He stomps up the stairs muttering about me being a stupid witch. I call my boyfriend at that point and say, this guy just had the balls to try and tell me the noise is not him. I got almost all the way through the sentence before he came running down his stairs, screaming at me through my door. Calling me all sorts of names and cursing me out. He started going back up when I asked, "Did you hear all that?" to my boyfriend. I told him he came down cursing me out and he came down again screaming. More cursing, more names, finally threw the outside door open while continuing to scream and calling me names. My sister had just pulled up and my nephew is now scared to get out of the car because this crazy man is hurling insults and names and other venom at me from the lot. He stalks off towards the office, closed for the holiday while still screaming and cursing. I get my sister and nephew into my apartment and I'm still on the phone with my boyfriend who has heard the whole thing. This douche canoe comes back in, calls me a lot of names and some slurs and stomps back upstairs. At this point my boyfriend is apparently flying down the street to go get to me. He gets there, parks and starts to cross the lot. This moron goes out on his balcony and starts screaming at my boyfriend, who hasn't done anything but start to walk across the lot.
You think I'm afraid of you? I'm not afraid of you, you dumb
racist N-word. My boyfriend never yells and I'm trying to get him in the apartment while this guy is just screaming down at us.
Every time she reports me, I get a fine. You wait and see what I'm going to do now.
My boyfriend just says, "You have been a problem since you moved in." He starts with the "I'm not afraid of you" crap again, so my boyfriend, all 5'7" of him, tells him, "Come on, let's go then." Several times, and of course he doesn't. He is all talk. I called the complex and left 2 messages, explained everything that happened and that I was no longer comfortable living here and that I wanted to be released from my lease. I also sent an email with the entire timeline of what had happened, also stating that I wanted out of my lease at this point and that if he did anything I would be calling the police. A few hours later, while at my boyfriend's, I get a notification on my phone from my dog cam. I hadn't thought to check it, but it caught the whole thing. Usually it only turns on with dog movement or noise, but I guess the constant movement and noise kept it turned on. I saved everything and then sent another email to let the landlord know my camera caught the entire thing. I don't hear back from them. Almost 2 weeks later, I email her more noise issues. I also state that I am upset that I haven't heard back from her after sending 2 emails and calling twice. I also let her know that I did report the incident to the police. I reiterate that I want her to release me from my lease as of June 30th. She finally responds. Basically gives me some BS about so many emails to go through and she needs to talk to the lawyer and get back to me. I get another response that night. She will allow me to move to another apartment and waive the $500 in fees, but she cannot do anything about the rent increase or she will let me out of my lease. Great, thanks for nothing. I didn't want to move, but awesome. It had been decided on MD that I would be moving in with my boyfriend. He doesn't want me there as much as I don't want to be there. I get another email yesterday that they are taking aggressive legal action against him, but with the court system backed up, they don't know how long it will take. And yeah, I don't buy it. However, she got permission to let me have my choice of available apartment for no fees and at my current rent. Too late, I am out. So now I've got 2 weeks to finish packing and get out of here. Thank God I like the neighbors at my boyfriend's place. And with this, we have reached the end of the video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, then please don't forget to check out my endless playlist, which has thousands of videos and hours of content. In addition, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell to not miss any of my daily uploads. Thank you so much, and I will see you again tomorrow.